There is a secret about learning a language that many books and classrooms forget to tell. The secret is simple. You do not learn a language only by memorizing rules, but by living with it, by letting it flow into your real life until it becomes a natural part of who you are. Imagine a child who learns to speak, not because he studied grammar charts, but because he heard voices around him, answered questions, made mistakes, and slowly, word by word, turned sound into meaning. That is how English can become your second voice, not just a subject in school, but a bridge to the world. Think of your life as a story that you carry inside you every day. In that story, English can become your tool for connection, your instrument of confidence, your doorway to opportunities. But this does not happen overnight. It begins in small steps. Maybe you start by talking to yourself in English, whispering thoughts, describing what you see. Maybe you look at the cup in your hand and say, "This is my cup of tea. It is warm. It tastes sweet." At first it feels strange, but slowly it becomes natural, and before you know it, you are no longer translating from your first language. You are living directly in English. Real life gives you endless classrooms. The street outside, the marketplace, the bus, the internet, even the mirror in your bedroom. These are your teachers. If you want to learn English deeply, use it in these places. Speak it when you buy something, even if only one sentence. Listen to it when you watch a movie, but don't just watch. Pause, repeat, copy the tone. Write it when you send a message online, even if your friends answer in another language. Every little action pulls English out of the textbook and plants it in your daily ground, where it grows roots. Many people fear mistakes, but mistakes are the price of fluency. A child does not care if he says a word wrong. He laughs. He tries again. Adults carry pride, and pride whispers, "Better stay silent than be wrong." But silence teaches nothing. Every mistake is a stone that builds your road forward. The more stones you place, the stronger your path becomes. So let English walk beside you in daily life, and do not fear the sound of errors. Those sounds are proof of growth. And when English begins to live in your real life, a new door opens. You will find yourself speaking with strangers, understanding stories, laughing at jokes, reading words that once seemed impossible. You will discover that English is not just about exams, jobs, or school. It is about freedom. The freedom to understand, the freedom to share, the freedom to connect with people far away, people you may never meet otherwise. So let us take this journey together. A journey where English is no longer only in books, but in your steps, your breath, your laughter, your dreams. This is the story of how to use English in your real life, and how that simple choice can change everything. There was once a young man named Amir who dreamed of working in another country. He knew English was the key, but every time he opened his grammar book, he felt trapped. The pages were filled with rules, exceptions, and long explanations. He could memorize them for a test, but when he met a tourist in his city and tried to speak, his tongue froze. His mind ran to the rules, but the moment for words was already gone. He went home frustrated, telling himself, "Maybe English is not for me." One evening his grandfather noticed his sadness. The old man was wise, not because he spoke English, but because he understood people. He said, "Amir, when I was young, I learned to play the flute. I did not learn by reading books about music. I learned by blowing air, by making noise, by producing ugly sounds before I produced beauty. That is how you must treat English. Stop waiting for perfection. Start living with it." Amir listened. The next day, instead of opening his grammar book, he opened his window and looked outside. He whispered in English, "The sky is blue. The street is quiet. I hear a dog barking." His voice was shaky, but he smiled. For the first time, English was not locked inside a book. It was flowing into his room. He began using English in small, brave ways. At the market, he tried saying thank you in English when he bought bread. The shopkeeper laughed kindly, but Amir felt a spark of confidence. At home, he placed sticky notes on objects with English words: mirror, door, chair, cup. Every day those notes spoke to him, reminding him that English was not a foreign visitor, but a growing part of his home. Soon, Amir's phone became his second teacher. He changed the settings to English, even though it confused him at first. When he received a message, he read slowly, trying to guess the meaning. Some days he failed, but other days he surprised himself. English words became less scary and more familiar, like neighbors he was getting to know. Then came his biggest step. One evening, he joined an online group where people practiced English together. At first, he was silent, afraid of sounding foolish, but then he remembered his grandfather's words, "Ugly sounds before beauty." He unmuted his microphone and said, "Hello, my name is Amir. I want to learn English." His voice trembled, but the group welcomed him warmly. That night, he felt alive, as if he had opened a new door in his life. The days turned into weeks, and Amir made English part of everything he did. He spoke when he cooked, saying, "I cut the onion, I wash the rice." He thought in English when walking to work, repeating, "I am walking to the bus, I am waiting in line." At first it was tiring, but slowly it became natural, like breathing. One day, Amir met a traveler from another country. This time his tongue did not freeze. He said, "Welcome to my city. Do you need help?" The traveler smiled, surprised. They talked for 5 minutes in simple sentences, nothing fancy, but enough for connection. Amir felt something he had never felt before, the joy of real communication. English was no longer a dream, it was a tool in his hand. That night, as he lay in bed, Amir whispered to himself, "The best classroom is life itself." He finally understood. Using English in his real life was not only about learning, it was about changing. Changing the way he saw the world, changing the way he saw himself. Amir's journey with English was just beginning, but already the world felt different. He realized something powerful. English was not just a subject, it was a bridge. Every day he crossed that bridge, he met new ideas, new voices, and even new parts of himself. At his workplace, Amir started trying small sentences in English. He worked at a small printing shop where most people spoke his native language, but sometimes clients brought documents in English. Before, Amir would avoid them, passing the papers quickly to his manager. Now, he looked at the words more carefully. One day, he saw a flyer that said, "Grand Opening Sale, 50% off all books." He read it aloud, slowly but proudly. His colleagues laughed, not in a cruel way, but out of surprise. "Since when do you speak English?" they teased. Amir only smiled. Inside, he felt proud that he had understood. Later that week, a tourist entered the shop, asking, "Do you print color copies?" Amir's heart raced. A few months earlier, he would have panicked. This time, he took a deep breath and said, "Yes, we print color copies. How many do you need?" The words were simple, but they came out smoothly. The tourist thanked him, and Amir helped with the order. That evening, Amir replayed the conversation in his head, smiling like a child who had just ridden a bicycle without training wheels. To strengthen his English further, Amir turned to stories. He loved reading, but novels in English felt heavy. So, he began with children's books, short tales with pictures. At first, he felt embarrassed. Why am I reading books made for kids? But soon, he realized how much wisdom was hidden in those pages. The words were simple, but the lessons were deep. He read The Little Prince and learned not only new vocabulary, but also truths about friendship and imagination. English was not just a tool for communication, it was a window into different worlds. His friends noticed the change. Some encouraged him, while others doubted. "Why waste your time?" one said. "We don't live in an English-speaking country. You will never use it." Amir did not argue. He only smiled, remembering how he once thought the same, but he knew better now. He used English every day, not only with people, but with himself. He had turned his life into a practice ground. Soon, Amir challenged himself even more. He decided to keep a small diary in English. Every night before sleeping, he wrote 3 or 4 sentences. "Today, I was happy. I spoke English with a customer. I read 1 new story." His sentences were not perfect, but they were alive. Over time, his diary grew thicker, and so did his confidence. When he read old entries, he could see his progress, like footprints in the sand showing how far he had walked. One evening, while writing in his diary, Amir thought of his grandfather again. He remembered the words about the flute. Ugly sounds before beauty. Amir whispered to himself, ugly words before fluency. That phrase became his secret motivation. Every mistake, every awkward sentence was not a failure, but a step toward mastery. A turning point came when Amir decided to try something new, thinking in English. It was difficult at first because his mind naturally wanted to translate everything from his native language. But slowly he began training his brain. When he looked at his watch, he thought, it is 7 o'clock. When he felt tired, he told himself, I need to rest. These tiny thoughts built strength like lifting small weights every day until the muscles grow. Then came the test of courage. One afternoon, Amir attended a community event where foreigners were present. The old Amir would have stayed silent, avoiding embarrassment. The new Amir walked up to a group and said, Hello, I am Amir. Welcome to our city. The group responded warmly, and a conversation began. It was not perfect. Amir searched for words, mixed up tenses, and sometimes fell silent. But the important thing was that he tried. By the end of the evening, he had made a new friend from Spain, someone who promised to practice English with him online. That night, Amir could hardly sleep. He kept thinking, this is real. I can connect with the world. English was no longer only about learning a language. It was about opening doors that had always been closed. Amir's journey began as something personal, a quiet battle with himself, but soon it started to touch the lives of others. The more he used English in real situations, the more people around him grew curious. His younger cousin, Sana, noticed him reading English stories in the evenings. One day she asked, Brother, why do you always read in English? Isn't it hard? Amir smiled and answered, Yes, it is hard, but that is why I do it. Hard things make us grow. Sana wanted to learn too, but she felt shy. She had always thought English was only for smart students or people who lived abroad. Amir told her, no, English is not for a special group. It's for anyone who is willing to practice every day. He began teaching her the same way he had taught himself. Small steps, simple words, real life. Instead of grammar books, he told her, start by speaking English at home. Say, I am hungry or I'm going to school. These little sentences are seeds. If you water them daily, they grow into strong trees. Soon, Sana was practicing too. Sometimes they laughed at their mistakes together, and Amir realized something powerful. When you help others learn, your own learning becomes deeper. Teaching became his second teacher. At the printing shop, Amir's colleagues also began to notice his progress. When tourists visited, they pushed Amir forward, saying, you talk to them. At first, they teased him, but slowly their tone changed to respect. One of his co-workers even asked him, can you teach me how to introduce myself in English? Amir agreed, and during lunch breaks, they practiced together. What began as private learning had become a ripple spreading outward. But Amir's biggest challenge came when he was invited to speak at a small community gathering. A local teacher, impressed by his growth, asked him to share his story with young students. Amir felt his throat tighten when he heard the request. Me? Speak in front of people? The fear returned, the same fear he had felt on the first day of English class years ago. But then he remembered his grandfather's words again. Ugly sounds before beauty. He thought, maybe this is another step. Maybe this is where I must be brave. On the day of the event, Amir stood in front of a group of 20 students. His palms were sweaty, his heart was loud, but he began, hello everyone, my name is Amir. Today, I will tell you my story. His sentences were simple, sometimes broken, but they were real. He spoke about how he started with children's books, how he used English at work, how he wrote a diary, and how he dared to talk to foreigners at an event. The students listened, eyes wide, not because his English was perfect, but because his courage was real. When he finished, there was silence, then applause. The teacher smiled and said, you have given them something more important than grammar. You have given them hope. Amir felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he understood that English was no longer just his personal goal. It was his gift to share. That night, Amir walked home under the stars, replaying the moment in his head. He thought about how English had changed his life. It had given him confidence, opened doors, and now it had given him a voice that inspired others. He realized something beautiful. When you use English in your real life, it does not stay with you alone. It spreads like light, touching others in ways you may never imagine. The next morning, Amir wrote in his diary, "English is not only a language, it is a bridge. First I crossed it, now I help others cross too." Amir was feeling more confident than ever. His small speech at the community gathering had made him believe that maybe, just maybe, he could do greater things with English. But life always tests us when we least expect it. One evening, his manager at the printing shop told him, "Amir, tomorrow a foreign client will visit. You will explain the design samples to him." Amir froze. A speech to students was one thing. Talking to a businessman about professional work, that was something entirely different. All night, Amir prepared. He stood in front of his mirror, rehearsing sentences like, "This is our sample design. We can change colors, fonts, and layout." He whispered them again and again until he almost memorized them. Yet, deep down, he was afraid. What if he forgot? What if the client laughed? The next day, the client arrived, a tall man with a warm smile and a fast accent Amir could barely catch. At first, things went well. Amir introduced himself, showed the designs, and explained the options. But then, the client asked a long question, something about delivery schedules and payment methods. The words came too quickly, crashing into each other like a rushing river. Amir's mind went blank. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Silence filled the room. His manager looked at him, waiting. The client repeated the question, slower this time, but still Amir could not understand. He felt his cheeks burn, his hands shake. Finally he muttered, "Sorry, my English, not good." The client nodded politely and turned to the manager, finishing the conversation without him. That evening, Amir walked home with heavy steps. For the first time in months, he felt small again, almost like that boy in the classroom who once wanted to run away from English. He opened his diary but couldn't write. He just stared at the blank page. His heart whispered, "Maybe I will never be good enough." But then something unexpected happened. His younger cousin Sana, the same girl he had been teaching, came to him and said, "Brother, today I spoke English in class. I said, 'Teacher, may I go to the washroom?' Everyone laughed, but I didn't stop. I felt strong." She smiled proudly, waiting for his response. Amir looked at her and realized what had just happened. She had faced laughter, but called it strength. He had faced silence and called it failure. Wasn't his mistake just another step, the same as hers? That night, Amir forced himself to write in his diary, "Today I failed, but failure is not the end. Failure is my teacher." He remembered a quote he once read in a book, "Mistakes are proof that you are trying." Slowly, his sadness softened into determination. The next day, he asked his manager if he could meet the client again. The manager looked surprised but agreed. Amir didn't prepare memorized lines this time. Instead, he prepared questions. "Can you repeat that? Could you please speak slowly? I didn't understand. Can you explain again?" He practiced them until they felt natural. When the client returned, Amir tried again. This time, when he didn't understand, he asked politely, and the client happily repeated. Sometimes Amir still made mistakes, but instead of freezing, he smiled and corrected himself. At the end of the meeting, the client shook his hand and said, "You are improving fast. Keep practicing." Amir walked home lighter that evening. He had learned something he would never forget. Success is not about never falling. It's about standing up after every fall. He realized English was not a mountain to climb once. It was a road with bumps, stumbles, and lessons. Each mistake was not a wall. It was a signpost pointing him forward. Later, when he spoke again to the community students, he told them about this failure. They listened with wide eyes as he admitted how he froze, how he felt embarrassed, and how he nearly gave up. Then he said, "But I didn't quit. I failed, and I came back stronger. That is the only way to learn." And in that moment, Amir discovered something deeper than confidence. He discovered resilience, the power to keep going, no matter how many times life tried to stop him. Months passed, and Amir's English slowly became a natural part of his life. He no longer saw it only as a subject or skill. It was becoming a bridge to new people, new ideas, and new dreams. One day, he received news that would change his life again. His manager called him into the office and said, "Amir, there is a printing exhibition in Dubai. Many international companies will be there. We need someone to go and represent us. I think you should go." Amir's heart skipped a beat. The word Dubai sounded both exciting and frightening. He had never been outside his country before, never stood among so many foreigners. The thought thrilled him, but it also shook him with fear. Could his English survive in such a place? Would people understand him? Would he understand them? After days of nervous waiting, Amir found himself sitting in an airplane for the very first time, looking out at the clouds. His diary was in his backpack, his pen ready. As the plane lifted, he whispered to himself, "This is the power of English. It is taking me to the sky." When he reached Dubai, the world around him felt like a giant classroom. The airport signs were in English, the announcements in English, the taxi driver speaking broken English. Amir realized something shocking. English was everywhere. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but it was alive, helping people from every corner of the world connect. At the exhibition, Amir stood at his company's small booth. At first, he felt lost among the big stalls with flashing lights and confident salespeople, but soon visitors began to approach. A man from Germany asked about design services. A woman from Kenya asked about printing speed. A group from India asked about bulk prices. Each time, Amir used his English, sometimes slow, sometimes with mistakes, but always with courage. To his surprise, people didn't laugh at him. They listened, they nodded. Some even said, "Your English is good." That sentence felt like music in his ears. He began to enjoy himself, greeting people with smiles, asking questions, learning new words. One evening, Amir was invited to dinner by a group of business people he had met at the exhibition. The restaurant buzzed with conversations in English, mixed with different accents. Amir listened carefully, sometimes joining in, sometimes just observing. He realized that English was not about perfection, it was about connection. Everyone had an accent, everyone made mistakes, but nobody cared. What mattered was the exchange of ideas, the building of trust. That night, as he returned to his hotel, Amir wrote in his diary, "English is not only a language, it is a passport. It opens doors to people, to worlds, to dreams that once felt too far away." The next day, something extraordinary happened. A large company from Europe stopped by his booth. The manager asked many detailed questions, and Amir did his best to answer. At one point, he forgot a word. He paused, searched for another word, and explained with his hands. The manager laughed and said, "You are creative. I like how you explain." By the end of the conversation, the company offered a small deal with Amir's printing shop. When Amir called his manager with the news, his voice trembled with excitement. "We did it! We signed our first international order." In that moment, Amir realized that English had given him something far greater than just communication. It had given him confidence, opportunity, and respect. He was no longer just a worker in a small shop. He was becoming a bridge between his town and the world. On his flight back home, Amir looked out at the stars from his window seat. His heart was full. He whispered to himself, "The boy who once feared to say a single word now speaks to the world." And it all began with using English in real life. When he landed and returned home, the community students and his cousin Sana were waiting for him. They clapped and cheered as he shared stories of the exhibition, the people he met, and the deal he closed. They listened with shining eyes, imagining themselves in his place one day. And that night, Amir wrote his most powerful diary entry yet. English is not the goal. Life is the goal. English is the key that unlocks it. After Amir's trip to Dubai, his life began to shift in ways he had never imagined. People in his town no longer saw him as the quiet young man who worked at a printing shop. They now saw him as someone who had traveled abroad, spoken English with confidence, and returned with stories that carried both lessons and hope. His cousin Sana, who had always admired his courage, asked him one evening, "Amir, can you teach me how you became so confident in English? I want to learn like you." Her words warmed his heart. He remembered the days when he struggled, afraid to speak even a single word. Now the very people who once doubted him wanted to learn from him. At first Amir hesitated. He was not a teacher, at least not in the traditional sense. But then he thought of his diary. Every page of it carried his journey, the mistakes, the small victories, the ways he used English in daily life. Perhaps that diary could help others too. So he agreed to start small lessons for Sana and a few of her friends at his house on weekends. He did not teach them like a school teacher. Instead, he shared stories. He asked them to bring objects from their homes and describe them in English. He encouraged them to practice conversations as if they were ordering food in a restaurant, buying a ticket at a station, or greeting a guest. Slowly, laughter filled the room as the learners stumbled, giggled, and tried again. One day, Sana said, "This is different from school. Here, we are living English, not just studying it." Amir smiled. That was exactly the secret he had discovered. Word spread quickly in the town. More young people began to join these weekend sessions. Soon, Amir's small living room was not enough. His manager, proud of Amir's success in Dubai, offered the printing shop after hours for the sessions. The same shop that once only carried the sound of machines now echoed with voices practicing English. Something beautiful was happening. English was no longer just Amir's key, it was becoming the town's key. Young people who once feared speaking began to say short sentences. Parents watched proudly as their children gained confidence. Even elders, curious to understand, asked Amir to teach them basic greetings. But Amir's journey of using English in real life didn't stop at his town. One evening, as he scrolled through his phone, he discovered online communities where people from different countries practiced English together. With trembling hands, he joined a group call. At first he was shy, his heart racing as people from Brazil, Egypt, and Japan introduced themselves. But when his turn came, he smiled and said, "Hello, my name is Amir. I come from a small town, but today I am speaking with the world." The others clapped and welcomed him warmly. That single moment gave him goosebumps. He was no longer limited by geography. His town was his home, but his community was now global. Night after night, Amir joined these online sessions, sometimes sharing his experiences, sometimes just listening to the different accents and learning new words. Slowly, he realized something powerful. The English language was not about sounding like someone else. It was about finding his own voice, his own way of connecting. One day, one of his online friends asked, "Amir, why don't you share your story with others? It could inspire many people who are afraid to start." That idea struck him deeply. He had always written in his diary for himself, but maybe his diary could be more than just personal notes. It could be a guide for others. So Amir began to record short videos with his phone. He shared how he used English when traveling, how he practiced with friends, how he made mistakes and laughed at them, and how those mistakes became stepping stones. At first, only a few people watched, but slowly the views grew. Comments began to appear. Strangers wrote, "Thank you, Amir. Your story gives me hope." And late one night, as he closed his diary, Amir wrote a new truth. When you use English in your real life, you are not only learning a language, you are giving yourself the power to connect, to inspire, and to change the world around you. Amir's small story was growing into something larger than himself. The videos he posted online kept reaching more people. Young learners from different countries wrote to him, asking for tips and encouragement. Some even said, "Amir, because of your story, I spoke English to my teacher today without fear." Others shared, "I started practicing at home, and now my parents are proud of me." One evening, Amir received a message that left him stunned. A community center in a nearby city invited him to give a speech about his journey of learning English. At first, he read the message 3 times, unsure if it was real. Him? A speaker? The boy who once couldn't order tea in English? His hands shook with both fear and excitement. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts battled each other. One voice whispered, "You are not ready. You will embarrass yourself." Another voice, stronger now, replied, "You have already spoken with people from around the world. You have taught others. You are ready. This is your chance." When the day of the speech arrived, Amir stood backstage in a simple white shirt, holding his notes. The hall was filled with students, teachers, and parents. The sound of chatter made his heart beat faster. He thought of running away, but then he remembered his diary. On one page he had written, "The best way to overcome fear is to walk through it." He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The microphone felt cold in his hands. For a moment, his throat tightened and silence seemed to press down on him. Then he remembered the advice he once gave Sana and her friends: "Don't aim for perfect English, aim for connection." With that, he looked at the audience and began. "My name is Amir," he said slowly, his voice trembling, but steady enough. "I come from a small town where I once believed that English was impossible for me. But today, I stand here because I learned one thing, that English is not just a subject. It is a door, and if you are brave enough to open it, it can lead you to new worlds." The hall grew quiet, every eye fixed on him. Encouraged, Amir shared his story, how he practiced with everyday objects, how he made mistakes, how he traveled to Dubai and used English to survive, and how teaching others made him stronger. His words were simple, but they carried truth and heart. He saw nods from students, smiles from teachers, and tears from a few parents. In that moment, Amir realized he was not just giving a speech, he was holding a mirror to every listener, showing them what they could become. When he finished, the hall erupted in applause. The sound filled his chest with warmth. For the first time in his life, Amir felt not only confident, but proud. He had used English to do something greater than himself. He had touched lives. After the event, a young boy approached him shyly and said, "Sir, I was afraid of English, but now I think I can learn. You showed me it's possible." Amir knelt down, smiled, and replied, "Don't be afraid. English is not your enemy. It is your friend. Use it every day, and it will walk with you wherever you go." That night, as he returned home, Amir wrote in his diary once again, "The language I once feared has now become my gift to others. The best way to keep this gift alive is to share it." Months passed after Amir's speech at the community center. His story began to spread further, carried by students, teachers, and even local newspapers. People described him as the young man who turned his weakness into strength. Amir never planned to become famous. All he wanted was to share his journey. Yet life had a way of rewarding those who walked with courage. One afternoon, while Amir was sipping tea at a small cafe, he received an email that made him read it twice, then 3 times. It was from an international organization that promoted education. They had seen clips of his talk online and wanted to invite him as a guest speaker at a youth conference in London. His heart skipped. London, the city he had once only read about in books, the place that felt unreachable for a boy from a small town. At first, doubt crawled back into his mind. Me? Speaking in front of hundreds of people in another country? My English is not perfect. What if I make mistakes? But then he remembered the promise he had written in his diary. The best way to keep this gift alive is to share it. And so, with trembling fingers but a determined heart, he clicked accept. The weeks that followed were filled with preparation. Amir practiced his speech every night, not in polished, complicated sentences, but in the same simple, clear English that had carried him this far. He reminded himself daily, it is not about showing perfection, it is about showing truth. Finally, the day arrived. As Amir stood in the grand hall of the conference center in London, he felt the same fear he had felt before his first community speech. But now, fear did not stop him, it sharpened him. He looked at the audience, young faces from across the world, each one carrying dreams and doubts of their own. He began, I used to think English was a wall, something that stood between me and the world. But then I learned, it is not a wall, it is a bridge. And today, because of that bridge, I stand here with all of you. His voice carried strength. He spoke of his journey from the tea shop in his village, where he couldn't order a simple drink in English, to traveling abroad, to teaching others, and now to speaking on an international stage. He reminded the audience that English was not just grammar and rules. It was courage, practice, and the willingness to connect with others. As he finished, the hall rose in applause, not because his English was perfect, but because his story was real. Amir realized then that success was not about flawless words, but about opening hearts. Later that evening, a group of students surrounded him. A girl from Spain said, "Your story gave me courage to speak without fear." A boy from Africa added, "You made me believe that English belongs to all of us, not just to those born with it." Walking back to his hotel under the London lights, Amir felt tears in his eyes. He remembered the boy he once was, the one who struggled to form even a single English sentence. That boy was gone. In his place stood a man who had turned his fear into strength, his mistakes into lessons, and his words into bridges. He opened his diary one last time and wrote, "I learned English to change my life. But in the end, English gave me something greater. It allowed me to change the lives of others. And that is the true power of using English in real life." The story of Amir was not just about learning a language. It was about resilience, courage, and the beauty of turning weakness into power. His journey whispered a lesson to everyone who heard it. The best way to master English, or any skill, is not to hide it in books, but to live it, breathe it, and let it shine in the moments that matter. And so, Amir's voice echoed far beyond the walls of any classroom. His story reminded the world that every word spoken with courage has the power to change a life, sometimes even more than our own.